going to start. So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Holger Dalkmann. I'm the program coordinator for the Informal and Shared Mobility program by the Volvo Research Educational Foundation. I'm really excited to moderate today's research forum. The focus will be on informal public transportation and the role of capacity building. We'll share a little bit more about the program and the details in a minute. But first of all, I would like to ask Henrik Normark, Director of VREF, for his opening remarks. Henrik, over to you.
Thank you, Holger. Hello, everyone. So I'm Henrik Normark, as Holger said, Director of Volvo Research and Education Foundations. And as from now, we will just say VREF as the abbreviation goes. It's really nice to see all of you here today and for this webinar, this research forum. And it's connected to our informal and shared mobility in low and middle income countries program. There's also connection to the Mobility and Access in African Cities program of VREF. So there's a dual interest here, but also more generally about capacity building, which is quite important for VREF. We are very much concerned about the link and the bridges between research, knowledge building, and education and capacity building, and that, by that also how research findings are used and become available for much more people than the research community. So that's a very engaging topic for us. And you will know more about the report, which then has been produced in partnership with CODATU. And so I'm happy to see Solène Bafi here today. Hello, Solène. Nice to see you after a few months. And so thank you for the cooperation about this topic and the report. With that, I thank you all for coming, and thanks to Holger for moderating, Herrie for presenting. So welcome, and let's go. Over to you, back to you, Holger.
Thank you, Henrik, and for highlighting the two key programs which are on mobility and access in cities in Africa, as well as on informal and shared mobility in low middle income countries. The program actually has different activities. One is a large international research program led by Jackie Klopp with 9 international partners and workers in 8 different cities on so-called living labs. And one of our respondents today is in fact involved in that. So we'll come back on, but also we doing regular policy papers, different types of events. And one of the policy papers and factors in partnership with CODATU. So for my end, there's thanks to Solène for joining. Is the paper we're hearing today. Background is that we see a trend towards that informal or popular transport or paratransit, however you'd like to call it, is a key features of sustainable transport systems in many cities around the world. And in the past, the simple answer was, okay, we should ban it, we should close it, but recognizing that this is such a substantial service which needs to be somehow improved, somehow is reformed, somehow integrated, but not actually abolished. So and that also brings us to the second part, which Herrie will talk about. But that requires a new mindset. This requires also reflections on how to do that. And here, the role of capacity building plays a vital role. And so we have also today a great piece of research done by Herrie in partnership with CODATU, reflecting also on these two issues also together. And then I'm very pleased also that we have three respondents to the paper, but sharing also some of their own work later on, and I will introduce them later. But for now, again, also welcome everyone. Please also feel free to also share who you are and from where you join in the chat, but also would like to have also a very interactive session. So feel free already also to provide comments, share with your own researchers in the chat, and there will be also later on opportunities also to raise questions. But again, also here, so would like to also keep also the chat really interactive. So with that, I think I made all my announcements, and handing over to Herrie Schalekamp. And Herrie is research consultant at CODATU in France, but also had previously served as research officer in transport studies at the University of Cape Town, and is also like a well-known and long-term participant and partner for VREF. Thank you, and handing over to you, Herrie.
Thank you, Holger, for that introduction. The paper is available online, as you've seen in the chat, and I'll be taking you through highlights of it. But actually, there's quite a long story. The first idea for this paper started more than a year ago in conversations with what is now PRISM, with the VREF in CODATU, and actually even before that. And so this is indeed a train of work that I think, and that a lot of us think is very important, reflecting on capacity building. And perhaps one of the biggest motivations behind this paper was that there is a lot of offerings in terms of capacity building courses, workshops, visits, documents, engagements. But a big gap is asking people how they experience participating in these offerings, in these opportunities. And so that's what we intended to do with this paper. And thank you for VREF for the support in organizing it, with me in helping with review, in helping with organizing this forum to launch it. 9 or so months ago, we had an interim forum as well to reflect on the process and to help with planning. And of course, CODATU, of which I'm part as a member and as a consultant, we drew heavily on the network of CODATU's activities in various African countries and cities, as well as elsewhere in the world. So this is what the paper looks like, and I'm very glad to see my co-author Sophie Monplaisir also in this forum. Sophie was for a year and a half the representative of CODATU in Luanda in Angola, in a technical cooperation that I'm sure Sulen will touch on when she gets the mic. And it was great working with you, Sophie, and also with several colleagues in CODATU, in VREF, in different universities and different organizations. They all acknowledged, to the extent that I could remember who all of them are, in the paper itself. There's also a QR code that you can scan for direct access to it if you didn't see the link in the chat. So we're talking about building capacity. We're talking about building capacity of government officials in particular, and in the context of informal public transport. Now, the term is, there are several terms, as Holger said, but we had to pick a term that would make sense when we reached out to officials to get their views. And we also had to pick a term that could translate into French and Portuguese, because we also did research in French and Portuguese in addition to English. So we'll leave that aside for now, but we settled on this term because it seemed to make a lot of sense for the people we wanted to reach, these government officials. This is the context in which about which we are talking. And of course, there's a lot of work going on, and this is what PRISM focuses on what is happening in this space with informal public transport, shared transport services. This example from Luanda, with the blue and white minibuses, that format is so familiar to us. The paint may differ, paint color may differ, but this is what we were talking about in this paper when we spoke to officials. What are their experiences of working in this context locally? We interviewed 10 officials in those 7 countries indicated on the map. They were at different levels of government, national, in a transport department, in an infrastructure department, in a transport authority. They were not all in the big famous cities that we all know well from research, but they were also in smaller cities and unknown cities to the research community. They spoke various languages, and not just French, English, and Portuguese. Of course, there's a multitude of other languages too. We try to cover cities that are growing. We try to cover large cities, small cities. We try to cover as much as we could. And we are very thankful to these 10 officials for sharing their time and talking to us against this background of informal public transport in their city and country. So we wanted to understand capacity, and we looked at it in various dimensions. And I draw here on Transport for Cairo's report last year on what is available in terms of building capacity in the transport space. I see there are two colleagues at least from TFC here in the forum today. And just to give you some sense, it's explored in much more depth in their report, as well as in the paper, what we mean by capacity. But it's not just training. It's a lot more than that. It's knowledge, knowing what things are, how things are, and skills, knowing how they work and how you do them. It's functional. So it's functional in terms of the different functions within a government. So planning, regulation, infrastructure development, but also technical issues. So how to build a road, how to plan a transport route, how to deal with passengers. And then, of course, very important, it's about having enough people in a particular government unit. We asked at the outset of all of these officials, what are the challenges with informal public transport that they face? It was an open-ended question, and as you can see, we got a wide variety of responses, of unique responses. And the point here is that there's a huge number of challenges in different fields, in data, in planning, in operations, in regulation, in public awareness, in funding, in stakeholder and governance issues. And so the officials we spoke to, as well as all of their colleagues we didn't get to speak to, have to deal with a lot. So their plates are full. To then drill a bit more detail into what they face, what they see as their task, we asked them what kind of measures they've introduced to deal with those challenges, all of those issues in the previous slide. And all of them said, well, we introduced regulations, some form of regulation to try and control, to try and manage, to try and understand what is happening in informal public transport. A lot of them undertook dialogue with stakeholders in the sector, were involved in vehicle renewal schemes, or were at least trying to plan those schemes. We're working on introducing licensing systems and digital technologies. And so they tried a lot of different measures to try and deal with these challenges. So this is kind of all still just the background of what we wanted to understand in terms of the capacity. So we asked them about the problems. We asked them about what they, in their government units or in government more generally, nationally, have been trying to do. And what comes out of this is that not only the officials we spoke to and their counterparts elsewhere have to deal with planning new services, the infrastructure, the operations thereof, have to be involved in dialogues and quite heated discussions with operators, with owners, with drivers. They have to manage the interface between these services and these people on the road through regulation and all of those. So people who work in this field in the cities in which we engaged on this report have to be able to do almost everything. The task really is huge and multifaceted, technical and social and political. It's really a mix of many different things. So we wanted them then to say to us, do they feel in their government entity equipped to address all of those problems, to implement effectively all of those measures? And not surprisingly, of all of the 10 people, nobody said that they had enough people in their government units and that they had all of the skills. It was a mix between either having enough people, having enough skills, or having neither of those really, and kind of feeling very uncertain about what they can do and about their capabilities. So there's a big challenge. Nobody feels well equipped. It's not a surprise, but it was good to ask them this question. And then in the paper, we also delved down into how they explain in the local context what this means in practice, what these gaps of not enough people or not enough skills mean to them. Then, and this draws again and builds on the Transport for Cairo report that I mentioned previously, is we asked them about all of the different capacity building activities that we knew they had participated in and that we found in literature. What had they or colleagues in their government units participated in? And no surprise, a lot of people had gone on study tours to other cities to try and understand how informal public transport and urban mobility more broadly works. A lot of them had participated in seminars and webinars, had spoken to experts, external experts, people outside of government to get advice on what to do, attended various workshops, technical working groups and conferences, and several other activities that they had participated in. Now, I had highlighted the most popular ones. And again, in the report, we explain in more detail what their experiences were and what kind of things they had participated in, specific types of offerings in these categories. So the ones on which people commented most, and these are not necessarily the ones in which most of our respondents had participated in, are these 4 items on screen. Study tours, they really felt that they liked the opportunity of seeing in front of their eyes, being able to touch what had been tried and done in another city, and engaging with their peers to try and understand how they could replicate or at least adopt lessons from other cities. Of course, the study tours have to be properly facilitated and have to be to a place which is relevant to their home city or their home country. And of course, no 2 places are alike, so there's kind of a shortage of this. But they came highly, people spoke highly of their participation in study tours. Workshops, specific workshops around technical or process issues, they also found really valuable. These are in-person workshops in their own city or regional or international workshops where they could join and tackle particular issues. Conferences, despite conferences sometimes being quite academic, people really enjoyed it because they enjoyed the different kind of perspectives from different sectors at conferences. People who do research amongst informal public transport operators or who document policies. The officials we spoke to really drew a lot of benefits from conferences and again, the in-person interaction that is possible at these events. Again, collaboration, especially with academic institutions, came up as a very positive experience. A lot of the officials we spoke to actually are affiliated to a university or studying at a university, or are part of collaborations such as PRISM, which I mentioned previously, in which they learn from research, and they also have researchers who help them understand, unpack their local situation and see what they can do in terms of implementing different measures of different types. Just one quote to give you just some insight into what somebody said directly. You can quickly read it there. This touches on workshops. The contact with other participants, that was really important. The tea break during a conference is where a lot of thinking, a lot of work actually happens. Even though it's not seen as a formal part of the proceedings, people really enjoy the opportunity to ask questions, to get them answered, to delve into things that they struggle with in their own context with informal public transport. Then where we had mixed feedback, not necessarily negative, but where people thought that there's room for improvement, but also where they had some positive experiences, but which they would like to build on, are these 4 clusters of activities. The first was seminars. People felt that often there's pressure from their government unit that they attend a seminar, even if they're not necessarily interested in the topic, and there's kind of a bit of a fatigue of seminars and of just being seen, or the pressure to be seen there causes a lack of interest in topics unless it's superbly aligned with what you want to learn. Short courses were problematic because there actually are too many. There's a lot of different short courses available online, in person, in different countries, in different cities, internationally, and our participants often struggled to select the appropriate course that speaks to their needs. And in fact, there are gaps also in what short courses are available, especially around process and political matters. There's a lot on technical content, how to deal with planning a new public transport service, or infrastructure related issues, or planning issues, but not so much on the social change processes that are also inherent in working with informal public transport. In general, online is problematic because it doesn't allow for this in-person interaction. I know we've all learned in the last years how to use a chat in Zoom or in Teams, but it's not the same as being there and being able to bend somebody's ear over a cup of coffee to really understand how their experiences can translate to your own situation. Master's and PhD degrees were seen as really valuable, but it requires a lot of time. It requires being able to take time out of your work schedule, and they're not necessarily directly related to your work with informal public transport. And in many cases, indeed, there is no local university or university in some of the officials' countries where they can go and study. So it necessarily means that they need to move to a different country, at least for a certain period of time, in order to do so. And in some countries, actually, the only place where people can get these kind of opportunities is in Europe or in the US, so somewhere in the global north. A quote that touches actually on several of these points on screen, needing to get leave leave from the government unit in which this person worked. And then problems with online, anything online, poor internet connection, or getting interrupted by people at work, getting cut short, getting called away at short notice to attend a meeting of a more senior person or on the political side. So in the report, in many of these capacity building offerings that I've just spoken about in the last 3 or 4 slides, we give examples. But actually, in delving through these examples, it's also clear that there is so much to choose from. It's very difficult to find your way. It's very difficult to know what is a good thing, a good course, what is a good workshop, and what is not. But I think it is important to know that there are many things out there, and it does require coordination. And that's part of what we see coming out of this work in the next months and years is trying to make sense of all of this and help the officials like those we engaged and their colleagues in other cities understand what is open to them, and also actively develop or connect the dots, several of these dots on screen, as well as others that are not particularly listed there. So just thinking about the future, things that came up and which we also document in the latter part of the report, officials are tired. They have huge workloads. And fatigue in general is an issue, and fatigue prevents them from participating effectively in courses, in visits, in online offerings, and generally it's a problem. And we need to bear in mind that training is not necessarily seen as being inherent in their day. And they need to bend over backwards to make space in their schedules and really convince their seniors in their own departments that something is worthwhile. Other points I've mentioned it, but I think it bears repetition, is that there's a lot of offerings that focus on technical issues. Some of the key trends from the past few years is the implementation of bus rapid transit to replace or absorb informal public transport, and the electrification of informal public transport or other public transport vehicles. And there's a lot of guidance to help decide whether it's worthwhile and to understand how you implement it. But on the change process side, there is a big gap on politics especially, and on change process management. But what came out strongly, and what is a great resource in this space, is where there are local universities, they're really quite well connected to officials, and officials feel that they can approach colleagues in in academia to help with addressing technical issues, with addressing these process issues, but also for their own training needs, whether it's in terms of a degree or doing a diploma or doing a short course. The other thing that came out very strongly is that there is a big need and a great appreciation for workshops that target these technical and process issues of change processes. And that's certainly something that we can build on in taking this work forward. In the report, we give some ideas of what different stakeholders can do in this space. And I'm also very happy with the respondents that we have in today's forum, who will talk from different stakeholder perspectives in more detail about this. Just a quote to end off with, I think, which sets us up with what our task is. There are immediate problems, but long-term training to prepare the next generation to take up this task also needs to be done at the same time. So it's not just about the officials who are, in a way, so to speak, in the system, but it's about who will take over from them when they retire. And several of the people we had spoken to are relatively close to that point of retiring. And they're concerned about it because aside from not having time to undertake, to train themselves, to build their own capacity, they don't have time to mentor a next generation of people. And so this is something that we as a collective in this forum and in our several organizations and networks of which we are part need to take to heart and bear in mind in our planning. It's not just about today, but it's about the long term of people who will do this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Herrie, for all the valuable insights. And in fact, looking at the last quote where there's references to next generation. And in fact, Henrik, even you're not part of the respondents, I might put you a little bit later on the spot as what VREF is doing, particularly around the next generation of researchers. But before that, as Herrie said, we have a great panel of respondents reflecting us on some of your work, but also to share some of their own work in the space. And while I will introduce them soon, also a quick reminder, feel free also to use the chat for any kind of questions and comments. We really would like to have a lively discussion, and we will, after these three respondents who will all have a maximum of 10 minutes, also have a question and answer session. So again, also would like to hear also from you. With that, I'd like to introduce you to the first respondent, which is Matthias Merford out of Berlin. He is advisor for sustainable mobility at the German Technical Corporation. Here, so he is work as a project planning officer and is also capacity development coordinator for TUMI, so the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative TUMI. So, and GSZ is obviously has a long track record and reputation around also capacity building. So we're really curious to hear more from you, Matthias. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Holger. And yeah, thank you so much, colleagues from VREF, for the invitation to this event. I was really delighted also when reading the paper, because I think I could just read so much of the realities that we are regularly facing. And I'm also more than happy to also see that there are more organizations that are kind of enlightening the same problem from a different angle. And yeah, I was really happy to read some results which are actually similar, and also would like to share with you a couple of our recent work, partially also with Transport for Cairo, which makes me a bit smile, because that's a very nice sympathetic point that we are using partially also the same terminologies here, as our studies seem to really build upon each other as well. And also happy that Herrie and Hand also in the call, and might also later in the discussion join to provide some more technical insights. So me, from my part, I will be rather representing or presenting from a general point of view here. So yes, having shared this general appreciation, I think it has been, yeah, not only a very to the point insights to what we understand to understand the capacity building needs of informal transit, but also kind of puts us in the role of understanding more or taking the authorities' perspective on sustainable transport in general. In some parts, I really liked and found sympathetic that it was some sorts of an homage also to the transport professionals worldwide, because a lot of what we are actually doing from an international organization's perspective is not always kind of automatically achieving or contributing to the transformative changes that we are actually seeking. And so this is like kind of a great way forward to become more effective and to maybe also work more effectively together. So I'm sharing or zipping through a couple of slides to not make it too long as well. So the next slide is basically for the legal notice. So representing here today the TUMI initiative in partnership of 11 partners supported by the German government, and kind of supporting cities worldwide in transforming their transport systems is kind of keeping us busy all the days with the different challenges, not only capacity building, but also finance and also introducing technological changes. And obviously also within GIZ, we are working on the ground, long-term oriented over many years with local authorities, but also with national ministries, different line ministries of urban development, transport, and others infrastructure related, on also working on some of the more systemic changes, which also relate to capacities. What we are actually doing at TUMI here in the headquarters, we are providing a larger knowledge hub, and we are organizing tailor-cut on-site trainings. We're having a large e-learning portfolio, so also very nice to have read what actually could hamper the participation in this kind of sources. And I think the discussion about what works good for which purposes and for what target groups, that is always very important to have to make an effective use of the scarce public funds that are trusted in our hands by our commissioning parties. So please have a look also to what we have here, in particular in terms of e-learning and knowledge products which relate to public transport and informal transport in particular. Yes, I think why we're all here is because what moves us is the global capacity challenge in sustainable transport. Colleagues a couple of years ago had the interesting calculation that we have a lack of at least 250,000 transport professionals, so direct transport experts in local governments worldwide, which is a very rough calculation, and you cannot it would take some more research to really fix that number, but even more people would be needed in like kind of related fields to have at least a basic understanding of sustainable mobility, as transport is not only an engineering or infrastructural planning challenge, but also a rather holistic social challenge, which requires much further capacity needs. So, but what have we actually been doing in collaboration with Transport for Cairo? So we asked us the question and to say, okay, we need much more evidence that capacity building actually contributes to reaching the overarching global challenges, such as combating climate change and reaching sustainable development goals, and that actually we don't have too much evidence on how that directly relates. And I'm actually not sure whether in the study we found the answer, but definitely we found some evidence, which we would like to share here, and also I would see is an interesting contribution. Yeah, so we started with the transport decarbonization pathways, which TUMI has been laying out in its 1.5 degree outlook, and stating, okay, we need to kind of decarbonize transport fleets, we need to elevate walking and cycling, we need to electrify rail transport and all of that. And what does that mean in terms of capacities that we actually need? And following also an holistical multi-level approach, targeting both individual, institutional, and societal levels. So here, kind of, this is also another study that I would like to highlight, because we are building here with our study also on the previous works that have been commissioned by UK International Development Corporation through its HVT program, and which has been focusing rather on the providers of different capacity building formats. And Herrie and Sophie-Anne also quote them partially in in their study as well. And so we also changed the perspective more towards the public transport authorities, obviously not so specifically on informal transit, but in a broader sense on sustainable transport. Yeah, we were looking into about 20 cities, which you can see here of different sizes and so on. I must say we have a certain bias because obviously our partners of the TUMI helped us in identifying these cities, which we later on surveyed as well. And therefore, these cities are somehow already connected to the international collaboration frameworks. There are a lot of cities outside that are not directly kind of addressed in this study. So always have that in mind when looking at the quantitative numbers and figures that I will present you also afterwards, because I think, yeah, diving deeper into more unknown cities would yeah, stress these challenges even more and yeah, actually draw a picture which is even more challenging, I could imagine. Yeah, so I have like kind of four quick slides with a couple of quantitative insights that I would like to quickly slip through, but I will also leave you the slide set here later on. And yeah, that looks like kind of, we first of all have a staff gap, and kind of the interviewed cities, they stated that they would like to have at least double of the number of officials and staff in order to kind of fulfill their task across all the different departments, which are not only technical, but also functional as well. Yeah, so you can see that here. Then we have kind of the capacities at the individual level. So where we could see that it is a challenge for the cities and authorities to actually hire people with an educational background in transport or with topics related directly to it. And an even larger challenge to hire people with an educational background in sustainable transport, which is not necessarily the case, because typically people working in the transport authorities are engineers or urban planners, but they not necessarily have this more holistic educational background, which then needs to be complemented by other educational offers or capacity building formats, I would say. And obviously in the long-term perspective, yeah, Herrie, you already shared it, impacts actually the academic offers that we need to address. So, and here you always, what you can see, and this is where we try to quantify, is the difference between how the transport authorities assess their current capacities versus where they would want to be. Yeah, and this quantitative research or approach we utilize to identify where the gap might be perceived larger or more important and higher than in other areas. Right. Yeah, also this slide highlights a little bit that kind of there's a backlog of academic learning offers and opportunities, which are very often complemented by courses, workshops, short-term offers, which have a more sustainable mobility or more target-oriented focus then as well. Last but not least, so this is kind of all the aspects that we investigated throughout the study. And yeah, it shows a little bit that we have the largest gaps actually in the sustainability with educational programs. So there's the largest gap with what authorities perceive as needed and what they actually can access. I think that contrasts very well to the VREF-CODATU research paper here, where they're saying, so either there is kind of not enough people to do the job, or there is maybe enough people, but they don't have the right qualifications. So I think this also underlines these two arguments here. We have also the number of staff as the third widest gap, and the widest gap actually being, yeah, the practical numbers of staff as well. Yeah. So to summarize that, yeah, I think I can jump over that because it's implicitly included in the previous slide. But if you want to read it as words as well, leaving that all here. So like kind of having the sustainability in the backgrounds of the actual transport experts and in educational programs seems the weakest capacity that authorities shine, but also enabling frameworks, the entire relation with national governments, regulatory frameworks, access to finance, how also kind of responsibilities are split. They also range very high and define actually the institutional capacities we can face. And yeah, pre-last slide. So this is actually kind of also already input for the discussion. So what we have seen here, that transport authorities dedicate naturally a huge part of their time and capacity towards solving immediate challenges, in contrast to like kind of focusing on a long-term strategic development. And this really relates also to kind of the capacities that we have here. So people are trained to design and shape transport projects, and I think many cities cope very well in that, but not necessarily address these challenges in a holistic manner and in the way we want. And therefore, we also have outcomes that are kind of not that positively evaluated from a sustainability perspectives. Yeah, and technical and functional capacity. So while there is this capacity that I already said to plan and implement transport projects in general terms, if you want to speak like that, there is very often a lack in capacity in the strategic planning tools, such as sustainable mobility plans, or with newer challenges of introducing new technologies, of addressing topics such as climate resilience in street design and public space, or, as you mentioned it in the study, kind of to transform and work together with the informal public transport sector and integrating the different systems. Yeah. And so this is, I think, something where we strongly coincide, that we also need to address, the classic functional capacities, which are marketing, project management, communications on very different side on the sides of authorities, on the sides of the informal transport providers, the typical business administration skills. So I think this is something that is generally not very high in the focus. And last but not least, how we as international organizations can work better together to complement each other's efforts, and so to make effective use also of the short-term offers, which are very highly needed. We know that kind of when there is a long-term accompaniment and a strong follow-up, our efforts can be much more effective. Yeah, just leaving you a couple of resources that also support transport. We usually use the term popular transport in collaboration with our different partners here. And also one more time, thanking you for the opportunity to share these results here, and congratulating you for the work, and I'm looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you so much, Matthias, with this well-formulated response, but particularly with sharing the latest study around as a capacity building. So it will be great. We will obviously we'll share like the presentation, but feel free also to share already also in the chat, so particularly so the latest findings also you had, and it's great also that we also joined us by TFC today. So but first moving to the next respondent now. So Sophie-Anne Buffet, she's a project manager at CODATU, and Sophie-Anne is also in charge of the capacity building and training activities in Africa. So Sophie-Anne, welcome, and looking forward to hear from your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Holger. Thank you very much for being here today. And I also wanted to thank, firstly, VREF for this collaboration, because this has been a very fruitful collaboration and very interesting piece of work also for us to reflect internally on what we're doing and where we're heading to. I didn't really prepare a presentation because I thought more of this as a conversation and a way to maybe also tell a story. I have to confess also that reading Herrie and Sophie-Anne's paper, I thought, okay, I cannot really add anything further. So I just wanted maybe to rather highlight some points and also bring a bit of context to some of the results that they're very carefully put in perspective with different context. So that's why I will maybe touch more on the specific city of Abidjan, which I know a bit better than other places. And some of the respondents of the study are officials from Abidjan. But just as an introduction, I just wanted to come back to maybe also why there is this interest on capacity building from CODATU. And this has been also ongoing for a few years now. And also this is interest on capacity building and informal transport slash paratransit slash popular transport. So just to come back to a bit of the history of the institution, so CODATU has been involved in technical cooperation projects and conferences in the Global South and mostly in Africa already for the past 40 years. And I think it was already like 10 to 15 years ago when the NGO started really operating technical cooperation that this diagnosis was made of a lack of capacities in the field of urban mobility among officials, meaning people locally not able to really be in charge of the project or really to be able to carry out the project because they were lacking the technical capacities. So that was actually also the reason for the involvement of CODATU in this field, and that was also the origin of the creation of the master programs in Lomé and in Rabat that CODATU was involved in. And that's also based on the feedback from these two master programs that soon the realization was not only it was necessary to have people trained on urban mobility in African cities at the master level, but also the need was also to train already working officials and technicians and experts. So that's why over the years the activities of CODATU in the field of capacity building expanded, or not necessarily expanded, but diversified to also try to adapt to the availability, to the needs, to the objectives of the local partners that we could meet and work with. So this is why we also started developing an online course like a MOOC on urban mobility in African cities. That was also the reason why we studied also some short courses on very specific topics to be able to train or at least to share information, to share sensitization among small cohorts of people on a very specific time frame. And this is also, I mean, of course, this is ongoing reflection, because the more that we keep on working, the more that we keep on seeing this lack of capacities and the necessity to build over the short term capacities, but also to invest in the training of the future generation officials and experts that will be involved in African cities in the field of urban mobility. And that's also where I think there is a strong intersection with the work that VREF has been doing by considering both the short-term and long-term perspective. So this is just to bring a bit of background on the interest of the association over this topic. And of course, paratransit has been at the core of the association, as it is originally it was a scientific conference bringing together researchers from worldwide in the 1980s already, and trying to discuss some of the blank spots of the urban policies and urban theories, and immediately informal transport and paratransit were identified as some of the key issues that were not addressed in other arenas. So it's been a long time that we've been talking about this topic during the CODATU conferences, and only more recently that we could really start tackling these issues with officials, because of course I think, academia is often a bit at the forefront of the reflection, so it took a bit more time to reach officials and decision makers and international financial institutions. So nowadays we're quite engaged in several projects dealing with capacity building and informal transport and paratransit at different levels. I just wanted, so I said I will tackle the case of Abidjan. I also wanted to mention briefly the case of Madagascar, because we are busy implementing a pilot project in Madagascar to professionalize the paratransit sector there, or at least just one line of minibus in Antananarivo. And that has been already a very interesting experience, because as the pilot project means, we trying out things as we go. We're trying to first professionalize the sector, but we realized that before professionalizing, the main priority was already to, of course, bring people together, officials, operators, civil society, to bring a common understanding, a common vocabulary of the topic, and to start understanding what can be done together. So I think we also had very ambitious plans regarding capacity building in this pilot project, and it started first by doing capacity building towards the officials to just sensitize them to what actually is the paratransit and informal sector in Madagascar, because they have to deal with it, but they don't really know what it is about and how to envision a city considering paratransit as a part of the transport offer. I mean, we've been talking for now a few years about this topic. It seems obvious for many people, especially for us experts, because we've been hearing a lot about it. We've been hearing a lot about all the innovations that are being done, but for a lot of people that are actually in position of decision, who do not necessarily have a lot of background, who do not necessarily have the luck to travel and to see other urban mobility systems, this is still a reality that the first step is just to envision what a city with a public informal transport offer could be. And then a second step was to engage capacity building with the paratransit operators. I think one of the easiest way to do so, at least on our side, was to start working on the business model and to understand what could be the impact of the new paratransit line in Madagascar on the operator's business model and how it could improve it. And I think it's always kind of an easy enter into the topic, as this is of a direct interest for most of the stakeholders present on the ground. So we'll see what will be the next steps. We kind of go with the flow, trying to identify as the projects go along who's needing what type of information. Is also important in terms of global sensitization, because a lot of the job is also, as I mentioned before, just to put people together and start discussing together with a common vocabulary. And just briefly, I wanted to mention the case of Abidjan, because I think it's also quite representative of those capacity building tools that we've been mentioning before. CODATU has been engaged in Abidjan already now for a few years, since 2021, as we've been implementing a first technical cooperation funded by AFD, by the local transport authority, which is called AMUGA. And it was quite interesting to see that this is a new generation of, I would say, of technicians and decision makers. So they are already quite sensitized to, on the contrary to what I just presented in Madagascar, they are quite sensitized already to the topic of paratransit and informal transport. So we can go definitely a step further immediately, because we're already talking and discussing the modalities and how to engage with the operators and what kind of vision we can have for the urban mobility system. There are already some channels of discussions with the stakeholders. But one interesting, I think, experience we had was during the first cooperation, which was also a way for us to start to better understand one another, understand better where we are at in terms of capacities in Abidjan. We organized a study tour, and to tackle paratransit and integration of paratransit services within urban mobility systems, we went to Cape Town. So that's, I think, a fieldwork that for many reasons resonate a lot with.
So Len, I think we all love to listen to you for even more time, but just want to ask you to come to an end. Thank you.
I will. Thank you. So I think the interesting point here is just that this was a first way to address the topic by trying to understand what resonates with their experience and for them to have a vision. And I think that's where the study tours are a particularly interesting capacitation tool. And that was a start to engage further in terms of technical activities, to do workshops then in Abidjan with experts once we had this common vision of where we could go. And this is also what brings us now to a second stage of the cooperation, where we can go and think of a roadmap, go and think of measures that can be implemented, because we had these different tools that we could, in a succession, use and engage with the partners there. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't really keep track of the time, but we can definitely discuss further in the discussion time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solène, in particular as highlighting also the importance of also the mix of tools and the long-term engagement also with partners over the time. So we have one more respondent, and I see already also Benji had a question, and some others already also shared some material. So feel free also to also already also put things in the chat and start also reflecting on there. But I'd like to give now Hanife Gaibe the chance also to speak and to hear directly also from somebody who's working for the city. So Hanife is the lead of the public transport mobility component at the National Treasure City Support Program. And she's also a PhD scholar at the University of Cape Town, undertaking research on informal and shared mobility and is part of the PRISM network. So Hanife, please share us your experience and your thoughts.
Thank you, and good afternoon from Cape Town. So I think firstly, before I go into my experiences, I want to appreciate the research and the report. I think this fits in very well with the work that I do. So part of the city support program in South Africa is that we work with the 8 local metro cities, and we in fact had 2 projects about just 2.5 years ago. The one project was in fact capacity building, or building a program for capacity and building technical capabilities within the cities, in the transport departments particularly. But there was also a project called the minibus taxi reform project. Herrie is quite familiar with that. He helped us with that project. And I think this research brings both of those sort of together very nicely. During our experience with the cities and in trying to build this program for capacity building, in fact, the feedback that came from the cities was that we don't want another course. We don't want another lecture. We don't want another learning program where we're going to sit in a lecture hall. You're going to give us a whole file of notes. We're going to go back to our office and it's going to be business as usual. I think that was a very important reflection and a highlight in that project for us, in that we thought that we were doing a right thing by we approached learning institutions, we approached the universities, and we were going to build this program. And the cities came back and said, we don't have time to sit in a 2-day workshop or lecture. So I think for me, this research comes at a very crucial time in the whole, in how our public transport is being planned and built in African cities. And we are sort of at the pinnacle now where we realize that, you need to integrate informal transport into our systems. We can't replace them. And we need to look at sustainable transport and how do we deliver that within our cities? How do we build the capabilities and the capacity within our cities? So I think what I truly enjoyed about the research is that it highlighted the difference between capacity and capability. And I think here, the report shows that the cities lack both. That was something that we grappled with also. When we think of capacity, we think of more people, more engineers, more planners, more budget, more resources, and things like that. But in fact, we had an instance where we had a city where they had about 8 engineers, but they were all very young engineers, and they lacked the institutional knowledge and the experience and the skill to do what they needed to do. So it's almost like, what I thought was that the great thing about this is it shows that we, in all our initiatives and all our programs, we need to build long-term institutional memory, and we need to make our learning programs adaptive to the daily tasks of these officials. So my takeaway from the report is that the training initiatives and programs should have capacity building embedded in our day-to-day tasks or in the day-to-day tasks of the officials, and that programs must be supported by change management. I think what I also picked up from the research is that you need to take the whole government institution with you. So it's not just your engineers and your planners, it is also your decision makers, your politicians, the people that sets the budgets, and things like that. So I think that was a big and a key takeaway from me, for me. And the last one was that I particularly appreciated the response from officials saying that there was this lack of follow-up engagement. And I think that we were particularly guilty of that. So we would have these workshops and we'd have these sessions and walk away, and we don't follow up on how things are going in the cities and how they in fact incorporated any of the lessons learned into the day-to-day workings. So my experience, going back to now what I do and how we've incorporated capacity building within the work that we do. So coming out of the research and the experience working with the cities, they felt that the peer learning platform was a much better way of building capacity and capabilities within the city. So we've had 5 sessions now with transport practitioners in this peer learning platform. What worked well is that I had a facilitator in these sessions, someone who's got a bit of a transport background, but comes purely with experience in making sure that officials are engaged. Unfortunately, most of them were online due to budget constraints and officials not being able to travel. But I think it worked well. What we also did was we would let the cities host these events. So they would sort of co-chair and run a particular event. So sort of take ownership of it. But the topics were suggested and recommended in consultation with the managers and the HODs within the transport departments. So it was co-created. Participation was voluntary, but the managers would sort of recommend which officials should attend which training sessions. What I did was I offered the secretariat support, and I think that helped a lot because officials, they're very busy. They don't necessarily have time to do the program, to set the agenda, to do timekeeping in these sessions, and then to send the invites. So I offered that support in the peer learning platform, and then stemming from the minibus taxi reform project, we then developed a community of practice. We launched it towards the end of last year. We've had 2 sessions thus far, and I think in the last session we had over 50 officials attend. So I think there was definitely this need for this sort of platform where officials can share their experiences, lessons learned, but also what came out of the discussions with the cities was that there is no platform where they can engage the industry and even the private sector in terms of technology partners or developers or passengers to, where they can build this trust relationship. Because as Herrie said, how things have been, how government has recently or in the past, how they've approached informal transport was to replace them with BRTs. So already we're coming on in this relationship where operators think you want to replace us. So it's sort of let's engage, let's understand where they're coming from, but also allow them in the planning phases within the cities to discuss how they're going to be brought in, how do we integrate them, how do we, sort of just listen what their challenges are. Both from a official point of view and the industry point of view. So I think that it's working well. I can come back on a different platform to speak about the experiences on this community of practice, but the cities are definitely engaging. The operators or the industry is excited about it, and I think we might have something good going here with community of practice. But yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak about my experiences, and a great job, well done on the research. Thanks.
Thank you, Hanifa, also for your insight, and feel free also to share any of the upcoming PRISM events, and where you're speaking also on the chat also with the group, because I think you're also doing great research also with that. So that was quite inspiring. I see also like some comments, some questions. So really like to open up the floor for anyone. So feel free also to raise your hand or type in your question. I see also there was a direct question also from Benji also to Herrie. Benji, do you want to speak up?
Sure. I'll just read it out, right? So one of the slides that you presented, Herrie, was what the public officials would use as tools. And the first one was regulations, as most of them went through there. And that tension of, if they don't have capacity and they start making regulations, how does that work? Or if they don't have understanding and they start making regulations, how does that work? And so would just love to hear your insights, whether or not it's kind of deeply proven by the research. I don't think it went into that question, but from your own experience in your long research in this field.
Yeah, Benji, that's a ubiquitous issue, having regulations and laws that are just passed or created without having any match with law enforcement capacity or how it works in practice. You know, having nonsensical regulations. It just seems that there's, in a way, it may be part of human nature to try and create rules to try and control a situation that's essentially outside of your control. We didn't delve into this because a lot of those issues with regulations are actually already dealt with in other projects and in other reports. But it just seems to be that the kind of knee-jerk reaction to problems, whether it's the informal public transport sector or other mobility or indeed other societal issues, the first response is to try and control it through words in the form of regulations or laws. And it just doesn't work. So in the interview, so we had questionnaires that we sent out to all the officials at the start of the, before we interviewed them, in which we just asked them to indicate. And then we had follow-up interviews with all of them a day or a few days after the questionnaire. And a lot of them explained to us this problem of either them as the officials or the lawmakers, the policymakers, the politicians want to be seen to be doing something. And it seems a relatively easy task to propose a piece of regulation or to propose some kind of rule system. And then it falls onto the officials, some of whom we interviewed, to make it work. But the officials are in a planning department. They have absolutely no control over law enforcement of traffic, which either sits with the police at municipal level or in a national level, and they feel trapped. So we had some explanations of what it means, but it doesn't feature in the report because that was not our particular focus. But it's something to be aware of. In trying to prescribe something, it's seen as having power, and in fact it doesn't. It just remains a piece of paper. So it's a complex topic. I don't know if I'm answering it completely adequately, but it's a valid question, and I think it does bear further research just to understand exactly what officials think they can achieve with resorting to regulations as the first measure to address a particular problem.
Thanks, Herrie. It's a little bit quiet crowd here today, so I'm still like digging into like the comments and piggybacking on some great people who have around. So Gada, so from Transport for Cairo, your studies, and as your colleague Handers is there your famously acknowledged in several of the presentations. Gada, you highlighted her so that there is a need to change collaboration mechanism. Do you want to expand a little bit on also that comment and also build in also any TFC observations?
Do you hear me well? Because I'm commuting, so I apologize for the noise.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, I think after the point that Benji pointed about how we work together there's always this issue of how often international organizations work in specific cities on capacity building and how these efforts need to be coordinated. Based on Matthias's points, I think the gap also in education is something that we need to talk about, and it hits also on collaboration with academic institutions, which is something that Herrie also pointed. So I think collaboration is somehow overarching as a keyword for us lately, and we're still thinking about it, how the difference it's happening on different levels. The way we are thinking about it's happening between international organizations and also between government institutions themselves, so on a vertical and horizontal level. It's still a bit of an area. It's good to feel the sentiment of it, to see that other people are also thinking that there is an issue there. But I think this is somewhere that we are interested in navigating more, even in the research that should be published soon. And thank you again, Herrie and Matthias, and Holger, of course, for
Thank you. You were a little bit difficult to understand, but I think key message was like we need more different types of collaboration, so more proactive between research as well as city governments, as well as also like facilitating or some more dialogue or so between the different departments, as well as also like a different organization in different parts of the world. So Matthias, as your GIZ is organizing a lot in that space, do you want to share your latest experience on how to create like a slightly different thinking around capacity building?
Yeah, I would not say slightly different. I think a lot of the things are coming together, and I think we are not yet as international organizations or different organizations working for capacity, which also includes obviously the academia and professional TVET organizations. I think we are not yet well in the place that we sufficiently lay out how our work actually contributes to systemic changes and improving the life of the people out there, to making kind of an efficient use of public money, of public funds, and that actually the investment in so to say comparison to investing in the hard infrastructure, in the soft investing in the soft infrastructure, which is capacities of institutions and of people, in contrast to investing in the hard infrastructure, which is also needed, streets and public transport systems and so on. So I think there is still this huge misbalance, and I think we can do a lot more to point out how our work, which always comes from a little bit different angles, focusing on different topics, working on different formats, how that actually can complement each other. And I would say there is still a lack of kind of working hand in hand. So very often, we are competing for different funds from the same donors, and kind of. But I feel over the last 2 or 3 years that has changed even more than in the past. So more partnerships are there. The kind of offers come more together. So we are stressing very often. Okay, we are all somehow frustrated that there is very often not a follow-up when there was a very well-designed training here and there. And and I think also kind of we naturally as if I would say was speaking for the TUMI partners like WI, ITDP, C40, some of the development banks, we're working with some specific cities which are kind of our partners, our clients on the ground, and we are naturally addressing them. But that limits us and keeps us out and keeps us too far away from the academic sector very often. And I think here to finding that intersection and to investing here would be worthwhile doing, while at the same time it's also facing hardships, because our commissioning partners or our donors, they also want to see effects in the short run. They want to see that something is improving in the countries where we are working. And now this also connects to other geopolitical challenges. So where's the added value for the economy, for the businesses, for the private sector in Europe, and things like that. So I think here we can still have to work both on the narrative and also on kind of a joint marketing, on that our efforts actually complement each other, and that maybe just talking, this is a little bit out of the topic, but kind of building up the capacities in developing and emerging countries for sustainable transport, having more robust institutions, resilient institutions, yeah, which are implementing state-of-the-art public transport systems and intelligent transport systems and so on. Yeah, not only helps cities worldwide to do a better job and provide better services for their cities, but also kind of increases the demand for technological solutions and actually increases the opportunities for an eye-to-eye collaboration between so to say global North or global South countries, however you want to call it. So I think this is an investment that is naturally long-term, that is difficult to explain to our commissioning partners, to our donors, and yeah, we have a couple of homeworks to do to explain them how that works together, and I think this is something where we will still work together also with Transport for Cairo and also reach out to VREF, to CODATU, and to others here in the call.
Thanks, Matthias. And I saw quite a lot of nodding, but particularly I think what resonated with me is even though it's almost written also in any policy brief, the importance of capacity building, it seems also in times of probably also more scarce resources also from partners on ODA. It's even also more important also to have a better justification and probably also some research in terms of not just the efficiencies of capacity building, but even also like particularly also the positive impact of that. So that might be also an interesting future PhDs around us and that. But Sophie-Anne, I saw you nodding several times. So what were your thoughts?
Well, that's going to be difficult to keep it short again. No, it resonated definitely because, we are at the intersection between this technical work and as well more academic work. So we can see it. It's difficult to figure out what are the intersections because at the moment, if you go in academia, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, there are no capacities yet as well to start providing for the technical world. So that's also where comes the challenge that Benji is also emphasizing in the chat. Then you also don't want to keep on exporting global North ideas on the field. So it's also this very slow process of trying to build experts and build capacities and then start facilitating process between cities of the South themselves. But that's also where it comes difficult within cooperation projects, for instance, and within the type of projects that we are involved in. I think there is a start for change there. I'm thinking also, for instance, based on what Matthias was just saying, for instance, the World Bank also more lately has been dedicated some still very small percentage of the infrastructural projects, but to capacity building, and it's starting to become more automatic. So we can see that there is this understanding that you need to have trained people to start piloting those projects, and the idea that it's also not just the people that will be the one directly concerned with the project, but also with maintaining this infrastructure, maintaining these services over the long term. So it's also building a cohort and long-term bunch of people. But there is there is still a lot of bridges to do between academia and practitioners, between donors and people working on the ground, and of course between countries and cities in the global South themselves.
Thanks, Sophie-Anne. Still looking for hands, so I just keep going. So we just Herrie, so you had you raise your finger.
I do, but I'd like to ask Hanifa a question. Hanifa, you are one of the officials we could potentially have interviewed, and you are actually doing a PhD. What does that do for you doing a PhD? How do you see it fit in your daily work, and what motivation do you need to give to your own unit to give you the time to do it?
Actually, you were just let me actually wanted to get to Hanifa. So building on what you said, I if you can elaborate also not just on your personal situation, but what do you think as we were here with the foundation, what kind of programs are more needed in terms of closer cooperation between cities and academia? What would help? What is what could be also innovative approaches?
Sure. Okay, so maybe let me start with the conflict and how I got it right to do both. So I wear two hats as a government, a consultant for national government, and then having to do something in my private capacity as a PhD student. It did require me to motivate that there is no conflict of interest in terms of I'm not going to, let the research affect my work. But there definitely are synergies between what I'm doing and in terms of my research and how I approach the projects that I work with in the cities. So what I appreciate is that in my research, I'm understanding and gathering data on the ground in terms of what operators require, what the needs of the passengers are. And I try to bring it very slightly in when I work with the cities in that, there are initiatives and pilot projects out there that the private sector is doing that the cities are not aware of. So I'm wanting to use that community of practice platform that I have to bring this private stakeholders in to present without me doing it myself, but inviting the stakeholders onto that platform to present to the cities what they are doing. And I think we haven't done that yet, but I'm slowly easing National Department of Transport to allow that to happen. But what it will definitely do is it will highlight that the informal sector is in fact doing their own thing. They're not waiting for government. And I think the government is going to be left behind if they don't know and understand what is going on. Technology is moving ahead and things like that. So I think I'm trying to bridge that gap between what's happening on the ground versus what government is doing, because they're going ahead and they're planning without realizing what's happening on the ground. Then in terms of the academia, so I've lectured, I've been a guest lecturer at UCT, but then again, speaking about my experience with local government to the students and the researchers there. So hopefully that bridges the gap between the two without me having to to really, bring in any conflict with the work that I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Hanifa, and sharing us your experience from both worlds and bring that also together. Henrik, I just highlighted us at the end of Herrie's presentation that where he also referred us to the importance of the next generation. So do you want to just say a couple of words about us the next gen program within VREF?
Yes, definitely ready to do that. VREF has for many years had opportunities for next generation scholars, but in the last years we have tried to gather and assemble these opportunities into one program, which we call the Next Generation Scholars Program. And what do we mean by next generation? Well, it's up to 5 years after doing your PhD, finalizing your PhD, and it's from researchers. So there are, let's say, individual opportunities, but also collegial activities. So we usually call them community of learning activities, which are then things like courses, short courses. We call them skills and tools short courses, which are then not held by VREF, but held by researchers, quite often young or youngish researchers that organize and develop and hold these courses. I think at least At least one of the course holders have been here today, namely Herrie. But also I may forget somebody else who had I think Gif Dumeda has also been responsible for one of these courses. We also organize research forums like this, but specifically for next generation scholars. And these, I should also say, these go across all the VRF programs. We had sort of a pilot year with the MAC, Mobility Access in African Cities program, but these days we try to do them across all programs. We have not so often, but it happens to sometime once a year or so, we have a physical workshop connected to a VREF event, if there is that opportunity, and generally sharing of knowledge and opportunities. So that's examples of, let's say, collective collegial activities. We also have opportunities more directed towards individuals. For example, as Holger put in the chat earlier, the Lee Shipper Memorial Scholarship, which is not a VREF scholarship, but it's supported by VREF, and we also help with the distribution of the call and the administration of the grants. We have study visit grants, which gives opportunity for younger scholars to visit another university connected to VREF research and have travel and accommodation supported. There's also a program called SLOCAT, VREF Young Leaders in Sustainable Transport program, which is an opportunity. I think the call is still open. I'm not sure if it's still open, but you can check that out. Maybe, Karin, if you have the link, can you check if it's still open?
The Lee Shipper or
no, the SLOCAT VREF Young Leaders.
Yes.
There was a call launched in March. I'm not sure if the deadline has passed. We also sometimes invite people to write think pieces. We have last year we had an invitation, so we have recently received 4 reports on think pieces on conditions for younger scholars and PhD students in African universities. And so that's very interesting stuff that we will digest and fine-tune into some kind of publication later in the year. So I think that's just in a nutshell. And you can send your, let's say, an email if you're interested. You can send an email to VREF and ask for being part of that community. It's mainly for people at universities, but it's also open to others who are interested in knowledge and research and making progress as a professional. So I think that summarizes it all, Holger.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And with that, we already are at the enders of that research forum. I think it was very rich, highlighting also that there is changes, in particular in the informal and paratransit sector, but that needs to be also more accompanied also with far more attention around the capacity building. In general, so we need to move forward. There's stronger on academia and city collaboration, bringing in a change management. There is a need also for longer term engagement and international cooperation here, and that we also need also to still do far more also to justify, in fact, so the capacity building. So with that, thank you so much, Herrie, for a really inspiring talk. Thank you, Matthias, Hanife, Solène, for your contribution, and obviously for Karin helping with that from the communication side. And thanks everyone also for joining, and stay tuned, and hope to see you at the next VREF Research Forum. Karin, you have a hand up?
Yes.
Last word to you. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I just added in the chat that if you want to be on our address list, where you will get invitations for activities and also newsletters and news from our programs, how to be active, you can find a form at the bottom of vref.se, and you can always follow us on LinkedIn and just reach out if you want to have more information.
Okay, with that, thank you very much. Have a good day. Have a good night. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.